And I said goodbye.
I know they said parks because I think he's dumped in the river or something.
No, I said goodbye to the cat. I said, you know.
Well, I'm feeling rejected already. Sorry. Sorry. Anyway, to recap, I didn't know we were going to do this now. Okay, yeah, fine. So we had a debate about 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, I think, and it was on. My question was hell and having a problem with a merciful and just God who would punish people infinitely for a finite transgression, yeah? Which I think is a reasonable question to ask. You don't have to agree with my answer, but you've got to empathise with, yeah? I hope you would agree that it's a reasonable human concern to want justice from a just and merciful God, yeah? Okay. Your answer was really interesting. Your answer was that God punishes people infinitely because he knows if they would have lived forever, that they would have transgressed infinitely, yeah? Which took me by surprise. And I thought about it and thought, yeah, that is proportional, you're right. Infinite for infinite is proportional, yes? So far I was convinced. But what I was aware of that we didn't get into...
On that point, there's an ayah that says, a verse of the Quran, which says that, وَلَوْ رُدُّوا لَعَادُوا لَمَا نُهُوا عَنْهُ, which means, had they been, so like for example, now we're assuming that they're being punished in hellfire, and they'll be screaming for the escape.
Yeah.
And the narrative here is that God tells us, had they been returned to the earth, they would have persisted in that which they were told not to do.
Right.
Which is going back to kufr or disbelief. In other words, those individuals, like you said, I mean, had they lived for even a longer time, the time that they had been on the earth can be generalized. Would otherwise be generalized to a longer period of time.
Yeah. So what Ali said.
Tony, just add on. There's another verse where it
could I have one of those three? And I probably couldn't. No, forget it. As long as you I just want to. I just like equal representation.
Yeah, same. You know.
Cheers. Oh, I didn't know I had that. Fuck it, forget it. I didn't even know I had that.
Is it 2 on 2 now?
No, that's fine. I don't need whatever.
You know, there's another verse. Okay, so that's where God says. Just to add on to what you're saying. Where God says, for example, if they if God was to show them the unseen, they would still say, our eyes have bewitched us. So even if God is saying, if I was to show them the heavens and the earth, and they came and saw everything, they'll say this is just magic, you know. God.
So I thought your answer was really good. Within the context of what you believe, it makes sense. It's self-consistent. Then my concern was, okay, but then although you balance the infinite punishment with the infinite transgression, it speaks hugely to an issue of determinism and free will, because now, have you seen the film Minority Report?
No, but can I come back on this point?
Yeah, sure.
And I don't want to go into too much technical detail, okay?
It is determinism is a technical debate.
It's a technical topic. Okay. There is actually somebody called Najmuddin al-Kufi, who is a student of Ibn Taymiyyah, who wrote a book which was a book of jurisprudence. Actually, it's not relevant to eschatology or theodicy or theology.
Sorry, what's eschatology?
Eschatology is the study of the afterlife.
Okay.
Study of the afterlife. So what he said something, but it had been refuted. I'll say it. He said that one view, and that's his view, it's a very minority view, is that if God punishes us based on what we would have done, had we been completely free.
Sure.
That's his view. He says that. Because the question of if God knows everything, and you know that kind of question, and He's done qadr, He's predetermined everything, and how do we have free will? How does it work? His view is he predicates it on what we would have had, what we would have done, had there been an event whereby everybody would have been completely free without the determination of God. However, there was a problem with that line of reasoning. The problem is, from our perspective, well, from at least my perspective, a theological problem. Which is that we believe that you are not to be held to account for something you would have done and you don't actually do. You are only held to account for that which you do.
Hang on.
There is a hadith that we like, a tradition, that says that if a slave or a person decides to do a bad action but doesn't follow through with it, he is not given the sin for it, and so on. So that view, which is that what would have been the case, the possibility, the realm of possibility, though it is represented in the Islamic tradition, is not one I personally subscribe to. What I believe.
Good, because that would have contradicted what Ali said, and I'll come on board.
But how does that? Sorry, just because now I have an issue with you now.
Well, but this is good. Let's have a chat.
Because the ayah is talking about me saying, okay, you know what? I'm gonna go and slap you, but I don't do it. I get a good deed. This is an action in this realm. What Allah is talking about is what they would have done. How does that conflate?
No. So what Allah says is, وَلَوْ عَادُوا لَرُدُّوا لِمَا نُهُوا عَنْهُ. He says, had they returned, they would have continued in what they would have, the disbelief or whatever they've done. It's not saying that he predicated the judgment of their hellfire on that fact. He's just saying that this is a fact. He's not saying, therefore, because of that, we predicate our judgment on that fact.
So
now that doesn't.
If they were to
it's just a conditional.
Okay, that doesn't then totally tally with what I'm not taking a pot, but it doesn't seem to totally tally with the way you described it to me. And I thought the way Ali sold it to me, it worked and it balanced.
Right. There is a view like that in Islam. It's a minority. But what I'm saying is, the truth of the matter is this: is that we believe if you don't enact something, you're not punished for it. The real way we put it is this: is that the presupposition, as I was explaining to you before, is that the punishment has to be proportionate in time with the crime.
Agreed.
And I'll give you this example.
That would be just and merciful. I'm seeking for a just, merciful God.
Here's what I'm saying. Look, if this man here, this good-looking man, yes, he pulls out a knife.
Yeah.
Hopefully he doesn't, because that happened before some time ago. Anyway, and he puts it and he kills me or kills this man next to him or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully no one actually does this. But let's say someone does that. Now he kills me. I said this to you before. And then he's presented in a court of law, and then the judge says to him, okay, or the jury even, we're going to decide on the appropriate punishment. And this man, strapping young man, he comes in front of the judge and he says, look, I want to be punished for exactly 1 second, because the time I spent to kill this man was 1 second.
Yeah.
Therefore, the punishment should be 1 second, because the crime took a second to commit. Now someone will say, well, actually that makes no sense, because actually the gravity of the crime, despite it being a second, was enormous. The enormity of the gravity of the crime was huge. Therefore, this kind of reasoning wouldn't even apply.
I agree, it would be fatuous, okay? Yes. However, when you extend to infinity, infinity is a totally different order of measurement, yeah? Now, I'm not suggesting that a 1 second crime should have a 1 second punishment. It should be, to an extent, consequentialist and proportional. But once you start magnifying things to infinity, it means that even if everybody on the planet were to suffer torture for 100 years, it would still be less than if Dawood, God forbid, were to suffer infinite torture forever. That would still be more. Infinity just changes the whole ballgame.
Tony, there's something you've done here which requires justification on your part.
Yeah.
You said you agree with the fact that it's not always the case that if a person commits a crime, that the punishment should be proportionate in crime.
Yeah.
But then you said that shouldn't extend to infinity. Now this is a value judgment which requires a burden of proof. Actually, why would what would work and be operational on a finite level not be generalized to the infinite?
I would argue the burden of proof actually would be on you to prove the opposite, because I'm simply arguing that finite versus finite is inherently proportional and almost self-evidently, whereas infinity versus finite, the disparities. I think the burden of proof is with you.
This is the point. You're saying that justice entails that there should be proportionality in time in the infinite realm.
I'm saying that if I'm dealing with a just and merciful deity. If he's not just and merciful, then no.
No. Okay. This is another question here, right? Because whether now you're introducing a theological element.
Yep.
Because in our first example, there was no theological element. So
well, it arose within the context of a theological discussion about a just and merciful God.
That's right, but we do have a just and merciful God in the Islamic tradition. But not just and merciful God. We have a just and merciful and wise God.
Okay.
And there's many different attributes. So if we were to introduce 2 attributes, it would follow theologically that we should introduce all the attributes that I mentioned in the text. Do you see the point?
Yeah, but it would have to be self-consistent to all of those attributes. So my one underlying principle is I seek self-consistency within a discipline and relative to other disciplines, So I think it's reasonable to look at any religion or ideology or human being and go, are they being self-consistent? And we all understand when people are not self-consistent. If somebody lies, or they're dishonest, or they're duplicitous, we all spot that instantly. So the acid test for truth seems to be self-consistency, and if I'm presented with a just and merciful God by Muslims and Christians, and I'm kind of a fan of both, okay, then I expect to see acted out a just and merciful policy, and infinity versus the finite, infinite punishment for a finite transgression on the surface doesn't seem fair.
What I'll say to you is what you've outlined epistemologically is what is a necessary condition for truth, but according to the majority understanding is not a sufficient condition for truth.
I wasn't claiming it was sufficient, but I do think it's valid so far.
So you're saying that in order for truth to be truth, that it would have to be at least consistent.
It would need to tick that box. Yes, it doesn't mean it's automatically true.
If that's what you're saying, then we agree. Now, so there's two aspects of burden that you have in terms of proving your postulation, if in fact you are making a claim. The first one would be that in the infinite realm, that punishment has to be proportionate in time. For example, had someone committed X crime in the finite realm, that should not translate to Y punishment in the infinite realm. Yeah. This is a claim. You can't say.
Yeah, no, I am making that claim.
All right, great. So you would have to provide evidence for that claim. You see,
I don't think the burden of proof is on me.
It's definitely.
I don't think you can shut down that. I think it's a natural human response.
Yeah.
If you're seeking self-consistency. To argue that is a disproportionate situation. But Ali squared the circle. He did square the circle. I could move the debate on.
Before we get to Ali's squaring of the circle, let's go back.
It's not impossible.
Okay.
No, but let's
we're going into necessary and contingent existences, aren't we? Yeah.
What I'm saying to you is, if you make a claim, you have to have some level of justification for that claim. Right?
I do. Truth is self-consistent. If the properties of God are justice and merciful, it strikes me, and we could poll the crowd on whether they think infinite. Okay,
the crowd could be ignorant.
I agreed, but just as an opening.
But the fact that he's there is definitely some level of ignorance.
Okay.
I'm only joking.
I would.
Sorry, go ahead.
I would. We'll just get entrenched here. I would contest that the burden of proof would be on you to show that infinite punishment for finite.
No, you were saying something important. You said that you expect self-consistency.
Yeah.
And then you said that the attributes of God are X and Y.
Well, Islam, I think, claims justice and mercy. So does Christianity. So it's a good wide debate.
No problem, but that's not all it claims, right?
For sure.
So it claims other attributes. So we can't select. If we want to say that we're talking about God's attributes as per X theological tradition, we have to include all the attributes of God.
Absolutely, but it shouldn't contravene any of that multiplicity.
So,
yes, we agree.
Meaning that these attributes cannot contradict each other. Basically.
Yeah, self-consistency. We both have the same litmus test for truth.
Accepted. But here's what you have to understand now about the Islamic tradition. That the way we conceive of the attributes of God is in a tripartite classification. So what you have is what you refer to as the intrinsic attributes of God. Then you have the will of God, and then you have what you refer to as the action-based attributes of God. So, for instance, an intrinsic attribute of God is his necessity, his oneness, or the power of God, the omnipotence of God, the omniscience of God, and so on. The will is an intrinsic attribute of God, but it directs the actions of God.
Sure.
Now, so what I'm saying is that there are some things God can decide to do and can decide to offset or post-date. For instance, because God has will, which we can, if you want, argue on first principles. Because God has will, He decides to do X rather than Y, or Y rather than X, because this is by definition what volition is. Which means he can suspend the actions of X attribute in favor of the actions of Y, and he can perform the actions of Y attribute rather than the actions of X, and he does so based on perfect knowledge, which is the intrinsic attribute of God. Does this make sense? Let me say it one more time.
Hang on, you asked me if it makes sense.
Does it make sense?
It could, but it could also be interpreted as a circular argument which gives him carte blanche to do whatever he wants, because it means that phenomenologically he doesn't have to be self-consistent with the way he's presented himself thus far. So although it might be a valid interpretation of reality, it's not a given.
You would have to demonstrate the circularity.
I could also point out, just as a sideline, and we won't go here, it's interesting that you are happy to suddenly have a vaguely Trinitarian nature to God, when I know with the Christian, you can understand the idea of therefore breaking one thing down into three, yes?
Well, of course.
Good. It would be nice to, in the endless debates with the Christians, if occasionally they didn't just keep hammering the Trinity.
Tony,
okay.
Yeah. Tony, there's a world of difference between talking about three persons and three types of attributes. So you're clever enough to understand that.
Yeah.
Let me give you.
I just don't believe this. I don't believe that you guys can't buy the idea of, just for a second, that hydrogen 2 plus oxygen, as a molecule, we'll all agree it's one thing, but it can manifest as a gas, it can manifest as ice, and it can manifest as a vapor. Now, I'm not expecting you to buy the Trinity.
Are you a Christian?
Of sorts.
Okay, well,
a Christian wouldn't think so. I like religion. I think religion's got good shit to say.
Listen to me.
Yes, Muhammad. Yes.
What you've described is a modal understanding of God.
Correct.
Now, in modern day Christian understanding, we talk about Protestantism and Catholicism, and this is seen as heretical because you have.
I'm not subscribed to that.
No problem. Let's just put that out there. First of all, why this is problematic, and even is seen as problematic by the majority of philosophers of religion. William Haskell, even I believe William Lane Craig, others see this as a problematic kind of understanding, and have some other analogies to present, is because it suggests that God can be X form or Y form or Z form. What can't happen is that water is water and ice and gas at the same time. All three doesn't.
We agree, but we would also agree that simultaneously its essential nature.
Are you with me, Tony?
You know what? I've digressed the conversation. I apologize.
I know you have, but no, let's just get this out of the way.
No, this could take time.
I know. But what I'm saying is, modalism is the idea that God changes. The Father changes to the Son, Son changes to the Holy Spirit. That you have different modes of God. But this is why this is heretical on mainstream's understanding of Christianity, is because the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is something which should always exist co-eternally, co-equally, and so on. But with the modal understanding, there's transformation going on. If you're talking about water to ice and ice to gas, then when water is ice, it's not gas, and when it's gas, it's not ice. And
no, but it's always H2O.
What we're saying is,
it's always H2O.
No, but that's irrelevant because we're saying that the form has changed. If you apply this to God, Father, Son,
an aspect of the form has changed, but ontologically, the essence of the thing is consistent. I don't have to defend the people who are traditionalists because I'm not one.
No, but remember, on the traditional Trinitarian understanding, there is no idea of the Father being either the Father or the Son or the Holy Spirit at any given time. It's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit at all times.
To be clear, I don't subscribe to a literal Christian or Muslim interpretation.
Going back to
let's go back to do the Trinity another time.
When we talk about self-consistency, we're talking about we have to differentiate.
We're getting necklaces here. It's like we're building.
We have to differentiate between parts and attributes. Now, H2O is 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Now, what I say is that anything that is made out of pieces is dependent. H2O is made out of pieces, therefore H2O is dependent. Now that doesn't apply to God because there's a world of difference between attributes and parts.
I literally only meant this. I meant as an analogy for how something can be intrinsically one thing but have 3 facets. I think just as an analogy, you can wrap your head around it. That was all I was saying. Because when Muslims seem to be mystified by the idea of a Trinity, I would hope that at least they can embrace the analogy and then reject it.
No, let's be honest. Christians have been, if you want to call it that, mystified and confused about the idea of the Trinity, which is why you've had different schools of thought, modalism being one of them, tritheism being on the opposite end of the spectrum. So if it was a straightforward idea, which is unmystified or otherwise unencoded, or it's not, there's no element of confusion in it, then there wouldn't have been such an
all I think is it's a tenable idea to explore. I'm not saying it's proven, and you may well be right.
But we've explained why this idea is problematic.
It's definitely problematic, but that doesn't kill it.
Let's go back to the
I believe it does kill it, but let's move on to the next bit. The idea is that you said something important. I said there's a tripartite classification or categorization or compartmentalization of the attributes of God: intrinsic, will, and verbal attributes.
Okay, I'll buy that provisionally for now.
What I'm saying is that there is a difference, and we have to make this difference between parts and attributes, because if I were to tell you, right, that you have an electric razor, and then you have a cutthroat razor. Right, the electric razor has many different parts.
Yep.
Now, the cutthroat razor has no parts